keep my heart set upon your voice, knowing that your word, it never comes back void. No weapon will prosper, no enemy triumph. He will not overcome. He can't scale these walls. Injustice will not win. Hell's gates will not prevail. Not on my time. Not on my watch. I am a watchman, and I take my place. As I wait, I will keep the faith. 'Cause I am a watchman, and I stand my ground. But if I never see it, I will stay the course. I will run the race, I will fight the fight, and I will keep the faith. I keep my eyes fixed on you.
Well, welcome everybody. Pastor Tim Carscadden here, our prayer noon watch, noon Central Time here in Louisiana, as we come to you each Monday here at the Pipeline Report and really just speak into the issues of our nation, especially with the election and all the events that's going on right now. We want to keep you focused, keep you engaged, and also give you, I think, what I call critical information and wisdom from the Lord. That's our prayer, that we can help you, not only you personally, but that you would help your friends and help all those around you. I'm wearing my Houston shirt because Houston is under the gun with Hurricane Beryl right now. We want to pray for them. We want to lift them up. The eye of the hurricane's going through just north of Houston. We're getting the outer bands here in Shreveport. We'll be getting the biggest brunt of it tonight. We're expecting around 50-mile-an-hour winds. Not too bad, and probably a lot of rain. So pray for the region. Mainly the water is going to be the big issue. We've been having flooding recently anyway, and now we're going to have a big dump of water on us. I think this goes all the way up to the central part of the country as well. So we need to be praying for our nation right now. We want to lift up Houston. They're going through so many things. They seem to be a target prophetically, trying to figure all that out, why they are. We saw that Hurricane Harvey. That was tied to the Israel issue. I know some of the issues in Houston are large, the immoral issues that are strong in that city. God is trying to speak to Houston. We want to believe for an outpouring there. But we pray for them today, and that God would strengthen them, and that the people would be wise in their decisions. One thing, I lived on the coast when I was young, and people, you tend to get used to storms and you don't think too much of them, but you never know what's going to happen, and then you be wise. A lot of people think they can weather it out when it's wiser to leave. I know Galveston, much of Galveston's underwater right now. Saw some of the video of that. So we do pray. We lift up Houston. We lift up all those in the eye or in the path of Hurricane Beryl today, Lord. We just strengthen the people, or let the body be awakened, Lord. Whatever you're speaking to that region, I just pray that they would hear the word of the Lord and be cleansed with your word today. Let the water of your word cleanse them, Father, in the midst of what is happening in the natural. We pray that in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, okay, so today we're going to talk about the presidential election, obviously candidates, and how to walk that out, how to hear the Lord in the midst of that, um, that God would direct you. When we inform people, believers, first of all, you need to recognize that as a believer, you have a responsibility to pray, to engage in the political process. There are so many Christians that this thing is so evil, don't be involved, and it is evil. But if we're not involved, it becomes more evil. Darkness becomes darker, and we as believers have to engage to bring light to darkness. I was reading in Acts chapter 22 when when Paul, a Roman citizen, was arrested, and they didn't know he was a Roman citizen. So this is a kind of a context, New Testament wise, is that we must proclaim our role as citizens. And in that story, they're about to beat him and scourge him and all this. And he says this, but when they stretched him out with thongs, Paul said to the centurion, I think sarcastically, I would think probably or close to it, he waited till they put him in the blocks or however they were doing it. And he said, is it lawful to scourge a man who is a Roman and uncondemned? So he decrees his citizenship and he decrees his rights as a citizen. And he had not been convicted. They were treating him under a religious law, not under a legal law. And he decrees that I'm a Roman citizen and I've not been convicted. Now it says when the centurion heard this, he went to the commander and said to him, what are we about to do? For this man is a Roman. And the commander came and said to him, tell me, are you a Roman? And he said, yes. He didn't deny his natural citizenship. And he said, I acquired citizenship with a large amount of money. And Paul said, but I'm sorry. The commander said, I acquired it for the large sum of money. And Paul said, well, I was actually born a citizen. So this guy was trying to brag at the cost it took him to become a citizen. And Paul said, I was born it, which carries more weight. He wasn't somebody that was an immigrant. He was actually considered a Roman citizen from his birthplace. So, and I want to say that to us, we do have to engage that way. Our three main criteria for who you should vote for is one, how do they stand on covenant Israel? And when I say I'm not talking about political Israel. How do you stand on covenant Israel? I warn you guys out teaching on that, what it means to be a covenant Israel stance. You get in the Bible, you understand what the Word of God says about Israel, its promises from Genesis forward and through the Old Testament, and then also what Paul teaches in Romans 9 through 11. You spend your energy there. You also read in the book of Revelation, the last days purpose of Israel. You read all that. You study Daniel. You do all those different things, and you understand what the covenant is. God is not so pleased with their behavior of Israel and the people of the Jewish people, but he is using it as a picture of covenant, that he said he'd make a covenant with that land and he's going to hold that covenant. So anybody who comes against that covenant is coming against the Lord. And we have to be those who stand. So right now, when you're looking at Europe and the turning in both England and UK and France, especially election Sunday, which was absolute chaos. They don't even have enough coalitions to form a government right now. But Jews are being told by the rabbis and by others to get out now because the factions that are taking over, communists actually have the most seats now in France. Communists, socialist communists, and they don't even hide the fact of what they are now going to be, in a sense, the majority. They didn't, the right won the majority vote, but they're like us a little bit in our electoral college. Just because you win the majority vote doesn't mean you're going to have the most seats. It's district wise, like we do in America. And that's a better way, as unfair as that seems, because you don't allow the mob to rule that way. Just because the majority doesn't mean they're right. And this way it gives a better representation. But anyway, so now there's riots in the streets. Antifa, one of the top leaders, will now become, unless they don't allow him, is the top leader. Antifa will now become a parliament member in France. And these are people that hate Israel and hate the Jewish people. When you watch the riots or the celebrations in the streets yesterday after the election or today after the election, you saw more Palestinian flags than you did flags of France. So that's kind of what's going on there. And the deception that they did, I mean, they partnered with Muslims and terrorists in order to make sure the right didn't win the election. That's how far the left will go to stay in power. Now, we need to remember that for America. There are no limits of what the left will do to stay in power. And they're already conniving and thinking of ideas of ways to do that. They want to put President Trump former President Trump in prison. That's the number one way they're trying. And we're going to see how that all plays out as we go. And so, of course, UK, the left-leaning administration took over, and they're already implementing old school stuff of socialism, bringing back old policies, allowing the WHO to rule over them, etc. Kind of scary that what's going on there. Now, his wife is a liberal, but the new prime minister, but she is Jewish, so we'll see how that plays out as well. So on the Israel front, as I always like to start with, the war is still going on. Hezbollah is bombing northern Israel. United Nations and the world are silent. Do you understand that the bombing in northern Israel and Galilee area from Hezbollah is unprovoked? Israel has done nothing. It's not like the Gaza battle. There's been, back and forth with that. There's no provoking. United Nations has said nothing, zero about that affair. And there should be sanctions going against Lebanon, Hezbollah right now. Nothing. Chirps, nothing coming out of them. And Israel's having to defend itself because of that. And it's sad when you see the videos from the Galilee area, which we love, and see smoke and fire and bombs going off. It's just disheartening to watch that. And in the political landscape there, Netanyahu, new poll came out that Naftali Bennett and his party, Gantz party, Likud, they would be actually they're leading in the polls. So there is some prophetic that after this war that it will be the end of Netanyahu's reign. Naftali Bennett is a weird character. I've heard him speak. I actually spoke right before he did an AIPAC event in D.C. one time. He spoke right after me. And, he says the right things. But last time he was a dual partner with Lapid, and he really caved on so many issues. I don't know how he would do if he stood alone. So we'll see how that plays out should he become the next prime minister. Well, that's a long way off, but we're praying for Israel. Pray for their issues right now. So, again, when you look for a candidate who you're going to vote for, Israel is a big issue. How do they stand on that? Covenant Israel, especially. Then you want to look at abortion issues. You want to see how they stand on abortion. And then here's a problem for us conservatives on the abortion issue is obviously Roe versus Wade's been brought down. The Dobbs case did that. Each state is making its own decisions. You may live in a state where they're going to choose abortion and you don't have a choice. And many times the Republican candidate is going to be a pro-choice, pro-abortion candidate as well, because he probably can't win in that state unless he is. So it becomes a very difficult issue to navigate. You kind of look for the lesser of the evil in that one. J.D. Vance, who's a vice presidential possible candidate by Trump, was on an interview yesterday and said he's in favor of the abortion pill. And he says that's in line with President Trump, that there should be access to that. Now, I haven't heard President Trump say that, but he did say that in the interview. So, he's a conservative, right? Votes the right way, but there he is. He's pushing for death through the abortion pill. And obviously the Democrat in that situation, his opponent is going to be pro-abortion. So you understand, at least he's against abortion. That's where you kind of choose the lesser of the two. In that situation. And then lastly is how do they stand on the Constitution? Are they for our First Amendment rights or Second Amendment rights, all our rights, really, basically? And are they willing to take free speech away from us or allow us to continue to have that? Or we have a right to protest? You look at the DOJ now that's going after abortion, those anti-abortionists who just silently stood in front of abortion clinics now are being prosecuted and put in jail. Whereas, the rioters, Antifa, BLM can burn cities down and they do nothing to them. That's that dual justice system. So you want to see how they stand on the Constitution. And one, you need to know the Constitution, read it, study it, and see how that candidate does. Google and find out how they stand on. Those are the key things we want to talk about here. Now we were, I'm going to ask Zach to come in here in just a minute, and we're going to talk about some topics here about this election and what we got going on with the Biden issue and the possible removal from the ballot of him and replacing him with Kamala or somebody else. There's a lot of legal loopholes to go. And so how do we stand as Christians? How should we pray? We talked about it last week. I want to build on that this week. We've got to have our focus properly. What is the prophetic saying? What is God saying about this? Multiple prophetic. I had a dream that I saw President Biden dressed for a funeral and going down an escalator. And I felt that was going to be the end of him. He was going down. I didn't have a timeline and all that, but I did see him go down. So I feel like that's probably true. And then Chris Reed had the dream as well that he will die prior to the end of his term. So there's prophetics that he's not going to finish out this term. There is prophetic for that. Now I realize anything can happen, but that's what we're getting. Others are getting as well. Now, Lance Wallnau did a show with a guy named Mark Nuttall, who I've been following for years. Mark Nuttall is an economist. He's a political analyst. He's run campaigns for senators, congressmen. He was actually part of the Reagan administration. He was appointed by Reagan and his administration on economic and stuff. He's argued in many courts, in the Russian Supreme Court, Ukraine, Bulgaria, other places. A very active lawyer, a real brilliant believer, though. A strong believer in the Lord. And we saw some of these interviews he had with Lance, and Lance actually let him speak and share, and it was very profound. So I want to break down one of them concerning this candidacy of Biden and how we should respond as believers. And he kind of gives us insight as to what's going on there, which I think is really important for us to know on how to do this. And let me cue this up here. And again, this is Lance Wallnau show. I just found this was from his website. You can go get it there as well. And this is one comment when they were talking about what's happening with this election. Let's look at this.
And what are your inside people telling you?
Well, first, just for the good of the audience, I did run a presidential campaign and a national party at one time where we would do analysis of the people's attitudes and perspectives of what they were willing first to receive as truth, and in their cultural values, how they were willing to apply it. The dilemma that the Democratic strategists, my counterparts that are still in D.C., are facing is they have an intractable problem in that they have a candidate that people believe are incapable of administering the job of President of the United States. It's not policy. It's not about even what's personal to them. If you can make a person personally flawed to the point that they can't function, then you can't elect them. And this has been a problem, fairly or unfairly, for President Biden. Last October, some strategists went to him and told him about this, that if there was not a policy issue that they could advance that would make people proactively vote for him, maybe even less than 50%, and ask him if he would consider stepping down, and I'm told that was rejected. Now, that problem has not solved itself, Lance, because it's unsolvable. It's not policy. It's just they have the ability and capacity to serve. There's a poll that just came out 2 days ago, and I think actually ABC broadcast it. 47% of the American public now say they will not vote for Joe Biden under any circumstances. Okay, that still doesn't mean he's unelectable. If you can make your opponent so monstrous, so unacceptable in character.
It's so sad. I mean, what they got to do is they got to recreate the who do you hate more? And it's not that I really like Trump. It's that I hate Hillary so much, or I hate the establishment. I want to do this to them.
Oh, there's no question, Lance. And for over a year now, 75% of the American public has said they don't want either one of these candidates.
Okay, let's talk. Zach, if you'll pop in here on this, let's talk about this topic here. They came to Biden. They told him it's not a policy issue. It's about can you run the office of president? And we've been saying for years, the last couple of years, we don't feel he's capable of that. Even the report on Access, which a reporter interviewed staff, said he only functions for about 4 to 6 hours a day, that he can actually function 10 to 4 or something like that, that he's actually in a window where they can actually work with him. Obviously, he has the largest staff of any president. I read that the other day, the largest staff of any president in the history of America, because that tells you the staff is having to run the White House and run the nation. Over $61 million it cost the American people to pay his staff. $61 million. That's how much we're paying. And we might want to be a little bit grateful because, he does not have the capacity to run the country. So this is a policy. It's not a policy issue. And we need to remember that. When he said that 47% of the people will in no way vote for Joe Biden. What does that mean for us, Zach? What should we read from that?
Well, this kind of lines out somewhat similarly to 2016, where it's going to be about who stays home versus who actually goes and votes. So, and that's what the Democrats are trying to do as well. On the flip side, is make Trump so bad that the never Trumpers who right now are saying they won't vote for Biden won't go vote for Trump either. The issue they have also is that you have JFK Jr. out there as the independent / libertarian, even though he's more neo Democrat than anything, is who's going to vote for him? Are people going to be motivated enough and dislike both of these candidates to vote for him? And how much and who goes and votes for him? And one big thing to point out is with the shuffling of COVID and everybody moving around, talking to a couple people over July 4th, is we really don't know how certain states, especially like North Carolina, California, are going to really fully play out. Does California have a chance, or are things going to be, persuaded the other way? North Carolina itself has had one of the highest influxes of people. New York, New Jersey have the biggest X flows besides California, Florida as well. So the landscape has shifted. But then at the end of the day, is we also have to realize is who's going to get out and vote, who's going to be motivated enough to vote, and that's how Trump won in 2016. It wasn't because he was such a great orator. It wasn't such he was such a great candidate. It's that people just refused to vote for the opposing candidate. And right now, that's a situation where Democrats have, and the Biden campaign has put themselves in. But they're wise enough to realize they understand who they're dealing with as far as their candidate, and understanding, okay, the tactic of how they lost last time. And so this is going to be the thing that comes out. And this is why we have to understand kind of the principles of how we decide who to vote for. And then ultimately is at the end of the day, sometimes we have to swallow a pill and make the best choice available, unfortunately. And so this is kind of where we're at right now.
And policy wise, President Trump is not a big policy guy either. He's a personality, and he has great staff around him. He has good policy people around him, which is wise. And I see this when I lobby Congress halls. I meet congressmen and senators that are really not policy people. They're good people. Many of them are, but they hire staff members that write the policy, and look, they share their heart and their vision, and then the policy writer kind of agrees with that and writes policy accordingly. And so that we got to see this in a big thing. So again, it's back to what Mark Nuttall was saying there. It's a matter of who do we think is physically capable enough of running the White House and leading the nation. That's going to kind of be the choice. He said something shocking there at the end of that clip. We'll move on from this. He said that 75%, the polls show 75% of Americans do not want either candidate. Now, I know that offends some of us who love Trump and like him as a person, or want him to be our president. But that's a fact. I'm not here it doesn't matter what we feel about him as a person or as a candidate. The fact is 75% of America is looking at this and saying, how did we end up with these two candidates? Why are we stuck with these two guys? Which is a broader picture as to what's wrong with our nation. It's just partisan politics, and it's about who has a better personality rather than who is a better statesman, and a better diplomat as far as that's concerned. And I don't know that diplomats and statesmen are any better sometimes, because you look at that in during the World War II in England, when they made a deal with Hitler as a statesman, as a diplomat, which was stupid, the Munich Agreement, which ended up starting the whole Second World War. So it's not that I'm saying they're better. It's just where the people are. And there's reasons for that. Hopefully at the end, we'll explain why America believes that way about the 75%. Which is, just put that in your pocket and remember that as you pray. that it's not going to be about his policy and so forth. It's going to be about who they think is the most able to run the White House. Let me shift this. He's going to talk about, this is very important for us to pray on the election beyond just the, how do I get my media back up there, Zach? If you'll help me there. There we go. No. There we go. He talks about the down ballot. Let's talk about this for a second.
And a majority of Democrats inside the Democratic Party have said they wanted somebody else than President Biden to run. Okay, so given that, it's to your point, the public has to make the decision of the lesser of two evils. And it's not a prominent place to be in the political process. Okay, so what's happening? But the information is a little more dire than that. I've been told by my counterparts that down ticket, that with President Biden on top, their chances of holding the Senate or taking the House are diminished. And what they can't afford as ideologues is to run a ticket that loses the White House, the Senate, and the House of Representatives, loses Congress. Because in the next 4 years, they'll have nothing to rely upon except their premises of their concepts, which are not functional. Okay, so where are we? The last thing I was told, that their last ditch effort on the comparison of the two candidates, which one is least acceptable, is that President Trump would be convicted and be found to be a felon. Now that's happened. He hasn't been sentenced yet at the airing of this show, but that's not the question. I mean, they can exacerbate that emotion by too stiff a sentence. But the problem is not the problem. The scenario is that he has been convicted and found to be a felon under a competent jurisdiction of law by a jury, and if he's still leading at the end of the Republican convention in July, I think you're going to see some maneuvering. Now, I don't know what it is.
So let me summarize.
Okay, so I think it's good he didn't say what he thought would happen, but there's going to be some maneuvering. Let's talk about, Zach. Let's talk about the down ballot. If you don't know that term, that meant when you have the presidential election, but you have a down ballot issue, which is all the congressmen, the senators, mayors, state elections, and so forth. And this is a real concern of ours, concern for the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. And so as we see this down ballot, this is where, to me, what you're going to see is my analysis. You're going to see electorates, congressmen, congresswomen, whatever, senators, whatever, if they're not in danger of losing their seat, in other words, it's a done deal, they're going to win, they're going to stand with Biden as a whole. If they're in danger of losing their seat, they're going to distance themselves from him. So they have to. They cannot be tied to this man, because if they're tied to this man, and especially if they come out and say he's competent, and I trust him, and everybody who's watching the videos and watching all the missteps, they're going to say, well, if you're that dumb, I'm not going to vote for you. So this is a down ballot. Talk about the down ballot, Zach.
Yeah, one of the big key factors in that as well is how the media is coming out, especially for the Democrats, CNN, MSNBC, all those. They're coming out hard against Biden. Even after that first debate, Van Jones, semi crocodile tears, came out and said, I love this man, but he needs to step down. And I don't disagree with that sentiment. And there were some other theirs who were a little bit more, made it more apparent that this needed to happen. And so that's going to throw a wrench into everything as well. And as Randy mentioned briefly last week, is they're going to have a big issue as well down ballot. If, let's say, okay, Biden doesn't stay on, who are they put up? Because that's going to be ultimately the biggest down ballot issue as well, because in a lot of these blue states and blue areas, and maybe even red states, is you're going to have a huge segment of, whether it be the woman vote, the black vote, the Hispanic vote, the Asian vote, that, let's say, they would agree with Biden, or I say believe the lie that he is competent and has 4 more years to go. Is, well, you who do you replace? If you were to replace him, who do you replace him with? But reality is, we have to think of, okay, if he were to stay, who does he go with? And the issue is going to be, is down ballot for Trump, is he has to become a better communicator on policy. When you go back in times like this and see who won and who flipped the House, it was. Let's start with Ray Bush, even a little bit. Bush was somewhat of a good communicator. He slowed it down, talked it, and that's what got Trump 2016. But you go back to Reagan, you go back to Nixon, and then you even go back even further to another even better communicator is Calvin Coolidge in the 20s. And so, and he obviously won certain by varying degrees of Harding ended up dying, but that's a separate issue. But even later, because he was such a great communicator, he won office again. And this is one of the things that hampers Trump, and this is why we can't idolize a man, is because the natural right now says Trump should lose, even if Biden were to go in there, Trump should lose, because of how things are run, and it makes sense to us and our logical minds that, oh, this should never be the case. President Biden's this, but look, at the end of the day, is there are bigger factors at play down ballot that at the state level, those smaller reps, mayoral races, city commissioners, city council, that could drive out the vote in certain states where if a certain enough of that population came out to vote, that might flip the state to a certain degree in a certain way, whereas your rural areas are going to vote how they're going to vote. And so
Yep.
that's going to be the big issue. And with the shifting of the landscape, is do we really know? And then there is the biggest caveat of all, that every single Republican state botched the whole last 4 years on, which was not dealing with the mail out ballots, not dealing with ballot harvesting, and ended up trying to play the Democrats' game. And at the end of the day, this is a game they're centuries behind, because they have morals, which is a good thing. They don't have a lack of morals and aren't willing to go to the lengths that Democrats are willing to go to. And let's remember, in the last election, that there were cameras outside of Detroit polling stations where they were being caught on camera. Nobody did anything about it, and the poll workers who were at the poll stations ended up putting barricades up to block video cameras from seeing what was going on inside. And then when we did catch them on video, as in Atlanta, of stuffing ballots, nothing was done.
Yeah.
So we have an issue with lawfulness in certain areas, which Atlanta and Georgia is a whole separate issue. But the reality is who's going to be motivated enough to go vote? And that's going to have to be our prayer, is that people's hearts are awakened to realize that they're, in a orthodox sense, their duty to stand up and go out there and vote biblical moral values.
And on that topic about down ballot, there's an article, a word that I should say Rick Joyner had, and me and Zach were talking before we came on. We could probably spend a whole week talking about his dream about the Revolutionary War, the Second Civil War in America that he had the dream about back in 2018. But in his book, The Harvest, in 1987, he was shown in a prophetic experience that the nation would be turning to the left. Now, you understand, there's a Reagan era, et cetera. So did not make sense probably back in 1987. But he said he saw the nation turning left as a nation for a long time, is what he saw. And he was shown that it was coming to a sharp turn to the left. He said, I was not shown whether it was good or bad. I just was shown it was going to happen. I was then shown a reaction to this would be a turn back to the right. And I saw that it would never again make a sharp turn to the left, but it was a danger that we would go too far to the right. This is a prayer initiative, because obviously we want it to go to the right. In the natural, we do. But in the spirit, we don't want to go too far. We don't want to become radicalized in that way. And he wrote this in his book, The Harvest. And then he was told that he said that an eagle needs both his right wing and his left wing. And when weight shifted to the extreme of either wing, it would crash. So the warning was that the extreme turns to the right or left, it could bring us down. Then a few years later, he said, I thought the extreme turn was the left, was the Clinton administration. He said, then I was sure when I saw the Obama administration that the country had turned much further to the left than Clinton. The Trump administration seems to the beginning back to the right. But now we have the socialist movement back to the left, of where we are right now. That's the battle that we're having right now. So This is very important. What what I'm going to read here, that I think we need to be wise in our prayer time, in our reactions. The extremes of both the right and left streams are not always healthy. But anyway, so will the right or left lead us to our destiny or our promised land? He asked the question, and his answer was neither. So much higher than either of these things are coming with increasing extreme political clamor. He said it's going to take a new generation of transcendent leadership to both see and steer us toward our destiny and our purpose. And he made this statement that I think is very important. He says, somehow, this is for all of us, and I'm speaking to myself too, it speaks to me. We've got to stop thinking right and left and start looking up, back to our roots. We need to see the place in the scriptures where the Lord has told us our purpose is, especially America, to spread the gospel of the kingdom to the ends of the earth. He quotes Revelation 12, 13 and 16. He said, I saw a dragon and they was thrown down on the earth, and he persecuted the woman who gave birth to the man child. And both the two wings of the great eagle were given to the woman so that she could fly into the wilderness, into her place where she would be nourished for a time, times a half time, for the presence of the serpent. And the serpent poured water out like out of his mouth, a river out of his mouth, so they might cause her to be swept away in the flood. But the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and drank up the river, and which the dragon had poured out his mouth. This is a whole picture of, we have a responsibility to help the eagle, help the prophetic purpose, the roots of our nation, and we have to go after this. And we, again, I like what he said. They're not focusing on the right or left. Speaking of that, Zach, anything you got out of that?
Yeah, the key factor is we can't put our trust into man's ideas and man's knowledge. I mean, Isaiah clearly points this out, and this is where Israel has gotten off, and this is where America has gotten off. Because if you go into man's ideas, ultimately it's a circle. You're going to end back up, and then when you end the far left and the far right, what ends up happening is what you're seeing right now is you have the marriage of, let's say, Christian nationalists. You know, those who nationalists bartering and lining up with, to be very blunt and clear, Islamists who, let's say, they have some certain, principles that are very similar, but going back to, deciding factor on who to vote for is that covenant relationship that we find in the Bible. And this is something that we have to deal with the idea of replacement theology. Is because of that replacement theology, somebody is now willing to align themselves with somebody who has a completely diametrically opposed view than them, that will cause them to think, right and left. Well, I'm right, you're wrong, so I must have to vote for this person. And in reality, is like, look, no, we have to go back. And even in this, which I love what Rick says, he says, the closing line is, for this reason, talking about what we've talked about, is the American Republic is called to be a Judeo-Christian nation. We are not a post-Christian nation. We are a pre-Christian nation. Wait and see. And the first of all, going back to considering ourselves our American Republic is fundamental to understanding how to navigate through this storm that we're going through, this wave, and then realizing that we are a Judeo-Christian worldview. Because let me say this very clearly: there are Christian groups who go before Congress, who go before the Senate, and will admonish anyone for saying that we are a Judeo-Christian world, that we are a Judeo-Christian nation, and that we are founded on Christian principles. They do not believe that we are a Judeo-Christian nation. They believe we are a solely secular nation that has, oh, some things might be Christian because, well, thou shalt not murder. But then ultimately they also believe this, and this is where most of it comes from. Is, you'll hear this, is we're a post-Christian nation. No, we're not. We're battling on where we want to go, but the reality is we are a pre-Christian nation, and we have to get back to understanding that and reminding ourselves that the very fact that even in our founding documents, you are a republic if you should keep it.
Yes.
And we have to realize that the difference between a republic and a democracy is that a republic is bounded on principles, and we've lost this understanding, and we've been idle in our words and gravitating towards a democracy, and not realizing that what are those things, those pillars that we were founded upon. And when we don't realize that what we're founded upon, getting back to the original intent, getting back to the original intent of even within the church in and of itself, this is much more of this way that the state of this country is an admonition on the church than it is on the actual state of the nation. Is because if the church can get in right alignment with the Lord and understanding Judeo biblical moral values, we might start seeing that happen. And Louisiana is a great example of that. And even in states on the East Coast where they're trying their best to hold to somewhat values,
Yeah.
they're able to have freedom and people are flocking to it. Look at Texas, look at North Carolina, look at South Carolina, look at like people are flocking to these states who are upholding freedoms and are not allowing these tyrants to come in through, say, a situation like COVID to rule. But that's the key thing we have to remember is we are a republic based and founded upon Judeo-Christian values, and we have to realize that. And ultimately, my new saying is backwards is the way forward. Is we have to end up realizing what it is our foundation is in
Yeah.
order to be able to go forward.
And that's what Rick said. We got to get back to our roots. Okay, one more clip, and then we'll start moving to the end of this program. So if you pull my video, yeah, let me get mine back in there. And this is with the economic crisis we're having. Obviously, he talks about that in the interview, but then he gets into what do the people want? Where's the heart of the people of America in the midst of this? And I think it's a really good insight that Mark Nuttall gives.
That. and they're looking at, well, who can solve the problem? As an analyst, I think about the fact that going back to when Bill Clinton was president, he was worried about the fact that he had smoked marijuana in college, and that was going to eliminate him from being president of the United States. And remember, he said, I didn't inhale.
Man, we've gone a long distance from there, haven't we?
I think where we've come from, and you're in my generation, where we've come from, on what that was a criteria for the proper foundation for being president to where we are today. The American public wants somebody who will take dramatic action to cure our problems economically, secure our borders, deal with our foreign adversaries in a proactive way that protects the United States of America. And I hate to put it in these terms, but they're not going to vote for somebody. And they see crisis coming, by the way. They can't explain it. They can't articulate.
The average American has a sense of dread,
They do.
anticipation. It's something. They have the COVID trauma. Now they're thinking something's coming.
Yeah, and what has happened from all the immigrants that have come across the border unchecked and so on and so forth. And they want a strong person with conviction, and they're more concerned about that in their decision-making process than his past character or what he's done in his private life. And if that prevails by the end of July, then they're in big trouble with this ticket.
Okay, so there, there's a mouthful what he just said there. This is where, when he said what the people want, you and I had to agree that is exactly what we want. And so our prayer, especially for former President Trump, is that he hears that message, that he hears what the foundational issues are in this nation, what we want. We want our borders protected. We want to be safe against foreign enemies. We want our families to be protected. This is what we want. And let me tell you, if you campaign on that, you're going to have a good chance of winning. And it's really not about their character. I think we learned that with Obama, with his history of his immoral failures, his drug use. We saw that with Clinton, where he's having sex in the White House, and yet the economy's good. Everything's going well because he's walking under the shadow of what Ronald Reagan did. He's getting to receive the benefits of what Ronald Reagan sowed. So the people kind of put that aside and they say, well, our life's okay. And that's not good in a sense for us believers, but that's a reality of where America is. And so when he says this, that's what it's all about. We've got to pray that this President Trump focuses on those issues and doesn't get into name calling. And I want to honor him right now. He's being very quiet as the Dems are going after themselves right now, which is really wisdom right now. Clay Nass, our friend, gave a word prophetically on our prayer call. The Lord last year, I think he said, the Lord said he's going to give the Democrats enough rope to hang themselves. and they are hanging themselves right now. And we just need to step back, and just let it happen. Don't get involved. Don't get angry about it. Just watch and see what the Lord would do. Watch and pray. Go ahead and speak into that, Zach.
Yeah, this is a lesson wisely learned from the Trump administration, or more so the Trump campaign. Is, Ben Shapiro had this whole bit every day when Trump was running in 2016: good Trump, bad Trump. Which one will we get today? And the wisest thing for Trump to do, because he didn't do it in 2016, was just be quiet. And because Hillary hung herself, but Trump would step out and put his foot in his mouth and hurt himself. So this is to speak to that point. But taking a step back a little further is, we have to realize the American people are, they're like Nuttall said, they're not afraid of hard times. They know hard times are coming. It's just at the end of the day, when we go through the hard times, what's on the backside? And I point to this, is there's been, I can't remember who exactly gave these words, but I think it's something to remind ourselves of. Is they talked about how there's going to be a rising of um, it's slipping my mind, the British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan. The two combinations there is like Margaret Thatcher made very tough economic decisions that in the short term hurt the British people and hurt the colony, everybody under the British rule. But in the long run, it set themselves up for ultimate success, because it got them through the storm and then allowed them the freedom that they had. And we have to remember that just because people, and this is where politicians get stuck, is they think, well, if I make a tough decision and it hurts the people, they're gonna hate me for it. Well, you're seeing right now that that's not the case. The fact that anybody, but even just economic, it's economic stupid. That's kind of gone out the window right now, is because for anybody to even consider, one, the cognitive level of this current president, the fact that they would even consider reelecting him, that's problematic. But then you look at the economics of it. Is Trump said in 2020, this will happen, which is it happening, and it has happened, but yet people are still considering that vote. So I think ultimately at the end of the day, there are hard times that we're living in, but it's like we're gonna have to go through hard times to get out of this, and that's a whole other topic to talk about. But I don't, this notion we have to pray for Trump, and even even if there was a left-wing candidate, Democrat candidate get in, is Kennedy. Going back to that historical perspective, is there sometimes there are decisions that American people are okay with if they understand, hey, you can get me through it. And that's where you could, if you had an orator, maybe like a Reagan or somebody who could explain, hey, we're going to do this, it may hurt for a little bit, but at the end of it, it's going to happen. And if things that he says do come true, then that'll be beneficial and people can go along with that. But I think we have to get away from this. Politicians getting in this mindset of being so elitist and thinking that American people are dumb. Is American people are very wise. You have to just give us the chance to step up to the plate.
I think that's the ultimate point. And I think his study, because I didn't have time to get into his study, maybe next week we'll do that. He explains where the people are much wiser than these politicians. They know what the issues are. And he just lined them out there basically in that topic. The problem we're going to have is if President Trump is sentenced as a felon. Now they've moved his sentencing to September for the New York trial. I don't know why they did that. July 11 was the original date. Trump lawyers asked they extend it to September. I guess they're trying to find some loophole in the issue. But Mark Nuttall, in this interview, one of the things he talked about is if he is convicted, let's say he's convicted, and the media is really playing on that. You saw Stephanopoulos do that the other day, a convicted felon. He doesn't say President Trump, he says a convicted felon, and that's what the left will continue to do. He said if 5 to 10% of the people just say, I can't vote for a convicted felon, we're in trouble. And that's going to be a big issue. We got to make sure that justice is done. We know that was an unjust issue, what happened in New York. By any lawyer's history in New York, they know that was a trumped up charge, no pun intended, but it was, and it was made up in order to convict him. We pray that if there was injustice and a bending of the law, that become revealed. That's our prayer. We got to pray that, because we can't afford to lose 5 to 10% of the vote because of that issue. So we want to make sure that's a big issue that we pray into. Now, somebody asked a question. I was looking on Rumble there. Somebody asked a question about vice presidential candidate. We weren't really going to talk about that today, but that's a good question. Um, uh, he tipped his hat this weekend. He said the candidate will be a workhorse, not a show horse. And that's kind of tipping your hat there. So you kind of start looking at the candidates. You're not going to have that showy guys out there that are talkers. The Indian guy, I can never say his name. But you're not going to have those type of JD Vance is a showman. People like that are showmen. Rubio is a workhorse. He's not a showman. He's not flashy. He'd be that. Maybe Sarah Huckabee, whatever. People like that. Nikki Haley, etc. Those are workhorses. When you look at the difference in personalities, if he's being truthful with his tipping of his hat there, that's kind of what we're looking at that way. There's a problem with Rubio, and this is a problem. The law does not allow the vice president and the president to be from the same state. So if Rubio was to be the vice presidential candidate, he'd have to step out of the Senate, which we don't want, and he'd have to move his residency. He'd have to move to D.C. or wherever he wants to move. He cannot be a citizen of California,
which he wouldn't do.
No. And the same problem is if they have a Harris Newsom ticket, you can't have that. They're both citizens of California, so they can't be on the same ticket either. Now they may try to, Harris may say I'm a Washington citizen. I don't know how they can do all the laws there, but that probably is serving in our favor there. To see those two on the same ticket is frightening. I'd start looking at islands in the South Pacific to move to. It's kind of a scary thought as far as that's concerned. So those are the kind of the candidates that are out there that are possible candidates that he's doing or going after. But look for a workhorse. Somebody's going to do the work behind the scenes. You got to understand, and some of you are going to be offended that love Trump. He doesn't want anybody to outshine him. He just doesn't. When you are a person with his personality, you've got to be the top dog. You got to be the attention. I believe, just looking at it, his love language is words of affirmation. And the more people affirm him, the more he gives them favor and platform. Well, if you have somebody who's strong out there and they're going to take some of the limelight, if they're going to be more intelligent, more intellectual, have better topics when they talk about issues, he's not going to allow that. He's not going to allow that to happen. He wants somebody who's going to workhorse behind it. That's why Pence fit for him. Pence was a quiet guy. He's in the background working. He didn't outshine, low energy, things like that. So any thoughts on that, Zach?
Yeah, just because you hear a name out there doesn't necessarily mean it could be a smokescreen. I mean, this is kind of something, sports teams do all the time is they throw popular names out there, but in reality, they're having negotiations with the person who they really want to. And the reason they keep the real name quiet is so that they can have real discussions, because at the end of the day, it's going to come down to, hey, the person most likely being vice president is if they ever had aspirations for being president, it's possibly a political suicide for them. In a good sense. I mean, it would show their humbleness and everything, but for their own personal goals and selfishness, it could be something that they may or may not want to do. So the names we hear out there possibly aren't necessarily real, but also is it would probably be somebody who is going to get some of those never Trumpers off the bench, and that's going to be the scary thing, is possibly who represents those people and who he might choose, because they're going to be diametrically opposed to freedom, to be very blunt about it.
Yeah. Possible Tulsi Gabbard, she's a former Democrat. You understand, if he's trying to get the independent or the middle people, he could be looking that area. We have some real issues with her past policies, but that you don't know. I tell people this, so they don't understand this. He's got to win the election. And some people, well, you need to pick this guy because he's going to fight like Trump does. Well, that's fine. But if that person doesn't help him win the election, it's not a good pick. And so he's going to have to choose somebody that he thinks going to take some niche votes and bring them over to the other side. That's what he needs to do. And as far as diplomacy, whether he does that or not, I don't know. We don't know. Nobody knows what's going on behind the scenes. I mean, I was getting words from people that are close to Trump that are saying that, Sarah Huckabee is a high potential. Now, she's a workhorse. I mean, she is that. She's doing a phenomenal job in Arkansas as governor for this last year. Doesn't have a whole lot of experience, but she is a hard worker and she's very loyal. And that is one thing he wants. He wants somebody who's extremely loyal. When I'm listening to Gabbard right now, she is really promoting Trump big time. To me, she's auditioning for the vice president. She's just saying what a wonderful guy he is, and his policies, et cetera, and which is, to me, it kind of makes me a little nervous because it tells me you're putting your application in out there when you do
I
that.
think, yeah, one quick point on her is we got to remember she supported Bernie Sanders for when he ran for president in the past. So that tells you everything you need to know on her quote unquote political swing, which
Yeah.
if somebody's willing to swing that far from the left to the right, that's very, very problematic.
Good. Okay, thanks, Zach. We're going to close out. I hope you've enjoyed the insight today, and I hope it's helpful to you. There's a lot more to that topic. We want to cover that. Hopefully next week we can do that, and just to build you up and to pray accordingly. Again, we're praying for candidates that are going to stand with Israel, covenant Israel. They're going to stand proper on the abortion issue, and they're going to uphold the Constitution. Those are the three key things we're really looking for when we want to pray for a candidate. There's a lot of issues. That's just some of the topics we want you to focus on. Again, there are going to be times if you're in a blue state, they're going to be very similar. You're going to have to look at the lesser, the evil there. Ask the Holy Spirit. The Lord will tell you who to pray for, who to vote for, but vote and encourage your friends to vote. And right now, in that interview, he talked about it, who has the most influence on who to vote for. And it's really the people that are closest to you in your social sphere. And that's who's going to influence you, but it also means who you can influence. People want to know what you feel. And when you do it in a genuine way and not in a demeaning way, and just speaking evil of Biden, what an idiot, but you're speaking really your heart and what's important for the family and for our nation, you'll carry influence. You really will, because the people you're talking to they look at you and they say, you love the nation and you want to see what's best for the nation. So therefore your words are weighted with them. And especially if you have somebody who's engaged in a local community, working within a local community, who's invested, then they carry a lot of influence. Here's what happened, and I'm glad to do this. Probably shouldn't say this on the show, but when it comes election time, people want me to give them, who's who in the zoo, who's the best, who's one, because they don't have the time many times to invest in studying and looking in their record and knowing what they believe. So that's where you can be the same thing. Create ballots for them, not ballots, but a list of who you think would be the best candidates, and a voter guide is a better way of putting it, a voter guide for them, and let them have it. A lot of times they'll just go do that. The Dems do that. I promise you. Here in my state, I know this for a fact. They pick up people in their cars and vans and take them to the polls, and they have a sheet of paper where they have all the ballot on, and so they just walk in there and that's what they do. So if it's not illegal, let's do it. All right, let's go there. All right. Well, I bless you today. We thank you for being with us today. I love each and every one of you. Thank you for your time and your prayer with us. We hope this was helpful. We hope that, as on this pipeline report, we're giving you the vetted information that you need, and that you will have a peace about this. Remember what Rick said. Don't focus on the left and right. Focus on our roots. What is the root of our nation? What is the purpose of our nation? And God, please put in people that will get us back to our roots as we go through this very difficult season that we're in. So let me pray for you as we go. Father, I thank you for everybody that's here today. We thank you for their purpose. Thank you that they're partnering with us to pray for America. And we want to decree today that America will be saved. All right. God bless you. We'll be back Wednesday night, live stream only. We're not having any gatherings this month during the middle of the week, just on Sundays. And I'm doing my message on the ministry of reconciliation. So we'll have another message on that Wednesday night, 6:30 live Central Time. And of course, Friday from Asia. And then Sunday, we'll be back in our service. So God bless you. Have a good day and a good week.